Hello, world, and thanks for listening to Master English with Tim, the podcast where Tim helps you master English in depth and detail and without ever hurrying. I'm Tim, native speaker, English teacher since 2005, polyglot world traveler, and podcaster. And in this week's episode, I'm going to tell you about how I spent the Thanksgiving holiday with my family, with a focus, on the food we ate and how we cooked it. So, I'm from the Midwest of the United States, which is a part of the country that includes states like Michigan, Iowa, Minnesota, Illinois, and Ohio. We were lucky this year because we got a lot of invitations from different parts of our family. You can only accept one invitation, though, so we went to have our Thanksgiving dinner on the East Coast of the United States, where my brother and his wife live. It's a very long drive from where we live in the Midwest to the East Coast, but it can be done in just one long day of driving. We decided to do the trip in 2 days, though, because there really is no reason to hurry, and because there are interesting places to see along the way. Even though we drive to the East Coast almost every time that we go there, this time we were planning on flying because it just saves so much time. But we booked too late and the prices had gone up really a lot, so we looked at going by Amtrak, which is the United States government-owned passenger train service. We looked at the departure times, though, and saw that there were only a couple of departures every week, and that they left around 2 a.m., so we decided to drive after all. We were really lucky to have good weather for the drive. It was sunny and reasonably warm for the entire trip, while a lot of the rest of the country was blanketed in heavy snow and having a lot of difficulty traveling. So we made 3 different stops along the way as we drove east. The first was in the small city of Chillicothe in Ohio, at a site where Native Americans built large ceremonial mounds, or hills, and which is now a national park. And the second stop was at another site that is also famous for the same kind of Native American architecture, but which is much smaller, but still an interesting place to stop. I've now stopped at 3 or 4 of these different sites that include Native American mounds, and probably I will record an episode about them sometime. On the second day of our drive, we stopped in Pennsylvania in the small town of Gettysburg, which is where one of the most important battles of the American Civil War took place. There's a lot to see there, so maybe we will go back there in a couple of days when we drive back home to the Midwest. In any case, I did say that this episode was going to be about Thanksgiving, and in particular about Thanksgiving dinner, so let's get started with that. A big Thanksgiving dinner is not just about the food, though. It's also about the guests, so let me tell you about them. We had 8 people in all. Me, my dad, my older brother's wife, my older brother's father-in-law and mother-in-law, and plus 2 foreigners, one from France and one from Siberia. My brother and his wife are both amazing cooks, and together the 2 of them did most of the cooking, but I did some cooking too. Actually, one of my favorite things about this year's Thanksgiving celebration was that we had people from other countries there, and in particular, people who had never celebrated Thanksgiving before. It's just really cool to welcome people from other countries to the holidays, and especially to a holiday that they don't have back home. I could talk more about this, but instead I'll let you listen to what our guest from France had to say about the holiday. He recorded his impressions using his phone, and there are a couple of noises at the beginning of the recording. I hope you don't mind.
My expectations for my first Thanksgiving were first, of course, a lot of food, turkey, mashed potatoes, Brussels sprouts. I was expecting to spend a long time sitting at the table, chatting and having conversation, meeting people over dinner. And I was expecting the table to be occupied by mostly family members of the person who invited me. My expectations were clearly met in terms of food, since turkey, mashed potatoes, and Brussels sprouts is exactly what we had. They were also matched in terms of meeting people and and staying for a long time at the table since we started at 3 p.m. with with the appetizers and only left the house well after 1 a.m. So yeah, I had a really great time meeting the family of the person who invited me. A beautiful recomposed family, which reminded me of my own. What surprised me a little, in a good way, of course, is that both me and another friend of the family were invited to this Thanksgiving celebration. This actually reminded me of my last Christmas celebration with my family, where for the first time we also invited some friends and neighbors. So this gave me very similar feelings. My favorite dish for this kind of occasion would be roasted chicken or roasted turkey, because everyone can pick whatever they like the most in it, and it really brings people together. So we had one with great wine, so that was perfect.
Okay, that was cool to hear some impressions from someone from another country about Thanksgiving. One small thing, he said that he expected roast turkey or chicken, but it's quite rare for people to have chicken for Thanksgiving. Turkey is the typical choice. Sometimes you do find other meats. Someone might have duck or goose or even deer meat if they hunt, but chicken is pretty rare. So the logic is that if you're going to have a bird, it's going to be a big one. So, back to our specific Thanksgiving dinner. We had these dishes: turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, mashed potatoes, Brussels sprouts, cranberry cake, and apple pie. This isn't actually a huge number of dishes, and we didn't make a couple of dishes that are really typical of a Thanksgiving dinner, specifically sweet potatoes. Those aren't potatoes that someone added sugar to, but instead orange potatoes that are naturally sweet, and green beans in cream sauce with mushrooms. But that's okay, I'm sure they'll be back next year. The star of the Thanksgiving dinner is, of course, the turkey. Our turkey weighed around 7 kilograms, and it took around 3 hours to bake. Turkeys usually come pretty much ready for baking when you buy them at the supermarket, so you don't need to do much preparation. You just need to find a really big metal pan to cook the turkey in. When you bake a turkey like this, juices drip out of the bird and into the pan below. When that happens, you can mix flour into the juice. When I say flour, I don't mean a beautiful plant. I mean the powder that you use to make bread. So that's Flour. So you mix that flour into the juices and you add some spices. That mix of juices and flour and spices is a meat sauce which is called gravy. This year, our turkey was really good, but I think most people agreed that the gravy had a bit too much fat in it this time. Another type of food that is served with the turkey and is made partly from parts of the bird is stuffing. Stuffing is a dish that I think most people from outside of the US have not heard of. You make stuffing by taking big squares of bread and cooking them in broth, which is the liquid part of soup, until the bread absorbs all of the broth and is relatively soft. The broth can be vegetable, turkey, chicken, or beef, but in reality, most people use chicken broth, and on Thanksgiving, it's most common, of course, to use turkey broth. Stuffing also has some pieces of vegetables in it, usually celery and carrots, and also a few spices. Some people give their stuffing even more flavor by putting it inside of the turkey while the turkey cooks in the oven. But a lot of people also just buy boxes of dry stuffing with a little envelope of powder with spices inside. This is a lot faster than making stuffing the traditional way, especially if you try to bake the bread yourself. That would take all day. So some people compromise, though, by using stuffing that they buy from a store in a mix and then cooking it inside of their Thanksgiving turkey. My personal favorite Thanksgiving dish is cranberry sauce. If you don't know what cranberries are, let me explain for you. Cranberries are medium-sized berries that range in color from pink to dark red, with most of them on the darker part of that spectrum. And they are almost always eaten cooked, although I personally think they're quite good on salads when they're uncooked. They are unique. They're sour, they're crunchy, and before you cook them, they're quite light. They have a lot of air in them, actually. Another thing that is special about cranberries is that they grow in swamps. A swamp is a type of land where the ground is always very wet. If you still don't know what a cranberry is after this description, then look for the translation on Google. So to spell it, it's Cranberry. I said just a minute ago that cranberry sauce is my favorite Thanksgiving dish. That's true for two reasons. First, because I love sour things, and second, because I'm the one who makes it every year. The first few times that I made cranberry sauce, I followed a simple recipe that I found in the internet. Basically, you just take cranberries and boil them in orange juice with sugar. You boil the cranberries until you hear them start to burst or explode, and after all the cranberries have burst, you just wait until the mix cools down, and voila, you have cranberry sauce. I'm not an amazing cook myself, but I do have good taste and also generally am a compulsive improver of things, so I started to modify this very basic recipe. The first thing I changed was to replace white sugar with brown sugar, which has more flavor to it. The second thing I changed was to use lime zest. Zest is the name for the skin of a lime, and it adds a lot of flavor to this dish. This year I made some additional changes. I added lemon zest and grapefruit zest to try to make a more complex flavor. Also, on my brother's suggestion, I added apple skins. He suggested that because they give the cranberries a less liquid texture. They make it more thick. And finally, I replaced part of the brown sugar in the recipe with something called molasses. Molasses is a very thick, slow-flowing, dark brown liquid that is a natural part of the sugar plant and also of brown sugar. Most of the sugar that people buy at the supermarket is white sugar, though. Sugar factories make white sugar white by using a special chemical process on brown sugar in order to remove the molasses or dark, sticky liquid from it. Molasses has a very earthy, slightly smoky flavor, and I thought it would make the cranberry sauce extra interesting. I was wrong. Even the small amount of molasses I used was too much, and the molasses flavor just kind of took control of the sauce, so much so that we couldn't taste the grapefruit zest or the lemon zest or even the lime zest, which normally has a pretty dominant flavor. The sauce still tasted good, but it wasn't as good as my old recipe, and it tasted too smoky, so we mixed the sauce I had made with my old recipe without molasses. The end result wasn't as good as my usual cranberry sauce with lime zest, but it still was good. And I'm happy that I tried, because if I had not tried, I would still be asking myself if maybe it would be better with molasses, and now I know the truth. Well, we had a couple more dishes, and fortunately they were pretty easy to cook. For example, we had Brussels sprouts. We just put oil, salt, and pepper on them, and baked them for a while, and they turned out well. We also had mashed potatoes. We made them with a special kind of potato called Yukon Gold. These potatoes are yellow and just a little bit sweet. They also had a little bit of mozzarella cheese in them and garlic, butter, salt, and pepper. So, as you can see, we had quite a few dishes, and it took us probably an hour to eat all of that. And after that, we kept talking and drinking until late at night. This last part about staying up and celebrating until late at night only really happens, in my experience, when there are no kids at the celebration. When there are kids, people usually go home around 9 p.m. I personally went to bed around 11, but some other people went to bed at 2 a.m., which to my mind is really late. Before I finish this week's episode, I want to say that everyone always ends up with leftover food and a nearly full fridge after a Thanksgiving dinner. And one of the best things about Thanksgiving is eating good food for lunch and dinner for the next several days, sometimes recooking things into new combinations and new dishes. Maybe I'll tell you about that next week, though. Thanks for listening, everyone, and see you next Monday.